ChatGPT hired Jonathan Ives to run their creative department. Jonathan Ives used to design for Apple, right? They didn't just use their own software to generate ads for themselves. They hired the best designer they could hire. And with video, we know that you can click off of it very, very quickly. So if you have like even 3 or 4 different audiences you want to hit, if that third audience comes like partway through the video, you've made that person wait. Even though it's visualized in this really linear way, no one really shows up that way. You know, they're kind of like looking around, doing some research now using, Claude or ChatGPT and like asking questions.
With me today, I have Garus Booth. He's the founder of The Booth, animation for marketers who lead with strategy. Today, we'll talk a lot more about video. I think it's a fantastic medium that has a lot of misconceptions nowadays. A lot of hot topics around AI, Higgs field, all these other tools that are in brands embracing, using, and how does that whole thing work. So before we go crazy with all those details, Garus, can you tell me a little bit more about how you started your journey with video? How did you discover that passion, and how did you end up where you are today?
Oh man, that's a long story, but thank you, by the way, for having me on and having this conversation. I grew up in a family of artists, so I think it started way back then. But if I kind of skip over a few things, I went to school for graphic design and kind of realized, close to getting into the graduation phase there, that I was going to graduate with a whole bunch of people that also had a graphic design degree. We were all going to go do the same thing. So I had sort of some opportunities to freelance at Sportsnet, doing some news graphics. And that was quite interesting to me because you had to communicate like a thought really, really quickly. And clearly for people watching like the news. And I was around a lot of people that were doing motion graphics and design work. And so I kind of caught on to what they were doing there. And it was a nice matchup of the graphic design knowledge that I was having and the sort of motion that looked really interesting to me. And that felt like a differentiator in the market. So I just kind of leaned into that. And then through kind of learning motion design and applying my design thinking skills to it, I just grew the business that way. And then noticed, early on in my career that there was this like opportunity where photographers were shifting from shooting still photography into wanting to do video work. So I had some experience in like the startup world and things like that. And I sat down, I made this thing called a lean canvas. And that is basically like a sketch of what your business could be, like who your target audience is, how you're going to serve them, what your break-even point is, what you're offering, all this kind of stuff. So I made a bunch of those, and this photographer cohort moving into video really stood out to me. So I went basically around to all the photographers and photography reps and everybody in and around Toronto, and basically offered the idea that I could help on the post-production side, getting them into video. And so that worked out really nicely. We grew the business up, adding motion design work, editing and finishing work to projects they were creating. And that kind of, in a way, turned me into a producer. So, it can kind of, that is the seed of where things got started.
When you were going through these pattern changes, what was the thing that drew you that way versus be like, no, I'm gonna stick with graphic design, I will be a graphic designer? What was that feeling like? I'm gonna shift, I like to change, I want to go in a different direction?
Right, yeah. Well, I really like learning new things, and things that are a little bit complicated I like to try and figure out. So I just was like, there's a little bit of a kind of tech nerd in the, friendliest possible way within me, that I was like learning this these tools is kind of interesting. The photography stuff is kind of interesting. But then the business side of it was like, okay, I can really help people achieve some goals here that they have. And I felt like I could not do the same thing with graphic design. I was, going to help them build a website or make some brochures, or at that time it was like CD covers. But I wasn't really like, I can help people grow their businesses. And I saw this opportunity with this to be like, this is a significant change that I can help people through and help them reach some of their goals. And that would probably be a good fit. So it was just kind of a combination of like seeing the opportunity, having within me the need or desire to like learn new things and grow. And then like that nice product market fit of like, this group needs or wants something and I can help them get that.
I was asking that because when I started, I graduated for radio broadcasting, and 3.5 years working in chorus entertainment, I started to notice that the marketing, the ad spend was shifting from radio and TV and print to, at that time, Google Ads was becoming more and more popular because you don't have to pay upfront 50K, 150K, or 200 for prime time spots or whatever on a radio show. You can pay $1 per click, and that was very appealing for small businesses, then to medium, and then they were like, wow, this is like really impactful. And I noticed that change in me, that I was being, you can reach a different audience, a person that they will never walk into a radio station at those days and say, here go 150K, promote my store. They would need to be promoted. They want to get people, but they are still in a different phase. So that's what I was asking. When I was looking at that, I came from that place of there's this whole different world that I don't even know, and maybe I can work with them, and taking that communication stuff, the radio stuff, and I applied it, and that kind of became websites and writing content, and kept moving in that direction. Now, when you were making the shift and you were looking at the new opportunities and the new way of doing basically the booth through video and through motion graphic, what are some of the ways that you were trying to get clients in the beginning? What are some of the first steps? You're like, this is how it was in the beginning, and this is how I was able to get clients.
Oh, that's a really good question, actually. I just trying to think back here. I mean, it was different when I started. Like, I've been doing this now for over 23 years. So at the beginning, it was a lot of just emailing people at agencies primarily. Emailing, like, I don't know if every industry has this, but like we have like artist representation. So whether you're a photographer, an illustrator, a designer, there are groups who will represent you and do sales on your behalf. So I went to the photography reps primarily because they would represent, a handful to a few dozen photographers. So they were kind of my conduit. If I could sell them on the idea, they would sell it through to the photographers who are their clients, because it's an expansion on their service offering. So I could position it in a way that was appealing to the rep from a business perspective, and then they would almost do the sale for me in a way after that to the actual photographers. And they would also be able to identify who on their roster was moving in that direction and who wasn't. So it was a bit of a filter for me too. And then after we like established a base of clients doing that, it became more about like bigger brands and bigger clients. So we moved into the agency world, reaching out to like creative directors and producers. That was a lot different. That was like emails to get in-person meetings. And then we would do these, they call them lunch and learns. I don't know if they're around anymore, but basically we would, as a company, provide lunch for the agency. They would all pile into the boardroom, and we'd do like an hour-long presentation with like Q&A afterwards, and they'd eat their lunch, And I think like 95% of them were just there for lunch, and like all the interns pile in, free lunch, great. But there was always a couple of people in there, like a creative director or producer, who maybe had a minute and was kind of interested, or they had a project they were working on and they needed something in the motion design world. So we'd follow up afterwards, and kind of nurture that relationship. And a lot of times that would turn into some business from the agencies. And then as things progressed there, agency world has changed quite a bit in recent years. A lot of mergers and, closures and things like that. So we kind of saw that coming well before kind of 2022 time period. So I started shifting the company into new business with brand direct. So that's more like talking to the marketing teams and seeing how we can add value to what they're doing. Sometimes it's also reaching out to like internal design teams. A lot of companies have like internal teams that do design work and stuff like that, and even a little bit of motion design work. But we come alongside them and kind of expand their capability, and work with them on stuff. But that's a lot of like email marketing as well, LinkedIn outreach, like full transparency. Like you and I work together with LinkedIn outreach, which is quite good. Yeah, and then a lot of in-person events and things like that, just meeting people. Like you and I actually met in person, right? Somebody else introduced us, so we had at a dinner. So I think that's really pretty valuable. I think people don't do that as often as they could anymore, post-COVID. It's a lot of, we're doing like a video call now, but I think it's like the default, whereas like a lot of in-person stuff actually sort of accelerates the trust in the relationship a little bit faster. So it's a whole mix of things that we do. It's kind of like a bingo card. Like every week or every month, you got to like cross off all the squares as you go. So yeah, those are some things. We also have a pretty I wouldn't say it's sophisticated marketing system, but it's for a company like ours in the creative industry. Like we run marketing pretty consistently. The projects that we create are proof that we can do the things that we do. So we create a lot of marketing material around the outcomes of those projects, what they achieved for the clients. So we run email newsletters and do articles, speaking things like this, various stuff about the projects that we've created. And it's what we like to do, because a lot of businesses that are in the same space as us kind of really focus on the visual side of the creative. Look how great this thing looks. I think that's really just table stakes. So we try and really focus on what were the goals the client had? How did we help them achieve those goals? What was the impact that the creative had for their business? So those are the types of things we try and communicate when we're doing sales and outreach. And
I find it interesting when you mentioned the lunch and learns, because I had one experience where I would say maybe it was more difficult than lunch and learns, because it was sponsoring the lunch area at a live event. So I had to pitch services to people at a live event that wanted to get away from the live event and have lunch, and I had to kind of walk around the room and sit down to some people, or sit already, and someone it was difficult.
That's an uphill battle when someone wants to leave to eat. Oh man.
Yes.
Getting hangry.
Yes. And there's no way to properly do this. What I realized is the timing, the opportunities. The person is eating, man. Like, what do you want me to do? How did this work? Like, you need to time it. It was very difficult, but I learned it was, if you stand at the right place, if you kind of start talking with a couple of people that you already know, you probably know someone there that finds the right time and space. And people that are not interested are just absolutely not interested. So you should skip those and try to use whatever you can, but try to do it the right way, because I think that environment, you take that into an email, you just blast everyone, or like you said, you're a creative agency, so you're focusing on how nice the ad looks like, or how creative and great is packaged together, as opposed to the result that you did when you work with your clients. Now, when you're working with clients, probably they have all kinds of ideas, and I'll take my radio days, the car owner that has a dealership and he wants his son to voice the ad and you're like, this is a horrible idea. No, it's pretty. I'm like, no, it is a horrible idea. You should get a proper voice talent to voice this, not the son of the owner of the car dealership. What are some ways that when you work with a client, you're like, look, I want to show you how to start a video the right way. These are my processes. These are my steps. What does that look like?
Yeah, totally. I mean, that guy's son, I mean, he's hypothetical, but he could be great, but I think the challenge is if he's not, and you got to give him feedback, that could get, a little bit tense really quickly. But you mentioned timing when you were doing those breakfast or it was lunch pieces. I think a lot of what we do with outreach of any kind totally comes down to timing, and identifying, who you're talking to and where they are in their day or in their buying process or all these things. And typically it's represented as a funnel. People are going from the awareness stage at the top, they're moving through the funnel, consideration, evaluation, and then there's a decision process, and then there's the post-purchase stuff, right? So even though it's visualized in this really linear way, no one really shows up that way. They're kind of looking around, doing some research now using, Claude or ChatGPT and asking questions there. And that could be, just at the early stage where they're discovering things and trying to figure out really what their problem is and what the tools are that could solve their problem. So I think when you get started creating a piece of content, you're really looking at who am I talking to? Where are they in their journey for the piece of content that I'm making? And what do they care about? What are they dealing with? What pressure are they under? That kind of stuff. And you want to be designing with a goal in mind. So what do you want to achieve with it? So if you're, say, having an issue where people are really excited about your product, the sales team's reaching out, the company that they're trying to sell to, the people there, they get really excited about the product, but then they drop off at some point. And maybe that's because the product seems too complicated or too good to be true, or they didn't understand that after they signed on or after you enticed them that there was a lot of work they had to do before you could actually, implement your software or your process or whatever. So if that's the case, you can look at, okay, my goal here is to reduce the friction there and maybe reduce some of the drop off that we're having after the first sales conversation and people are really excited. If you're going to do that, you're designing a piece of content for a really specific purpose with a person in mind who you understand what they're going through, what their pressures are, all that kind of stuff. It means that your piece of content you create, video content, is probably going to be more successful. And if it's not, you have a way of assessing where it might have gone wrong, because you're really clear about who you're talking to, what they need, and what the purpose of the piece of content actually is.
And if someone is, like you were saying, you are thinking of who you're going to talk, where are they in their journey, what they care about, pain points, you design with that goal in mind. You didn't mention script writing, lighting, cameras, or anything like that. All this goes before planning what the videos would be, before starting that process.
Yes.
Okay, so how does that work?
Yeah,
You have all of this. What are the next steps?
Once you understand who you're speaking to, what your goals are, and where you want to try and address the issue, and you could say I want to address the issue across the entire funnel. You could do that, and you may be able to make a couple of pieces of content that are able to function that way, or you could create something that maybe is a bit modular, and you could reassemble it and kind of help hit the awareness stage, and then maybe there's something off of that story that you can kind of do some mid-funnel content that helps them kind of understand your product a little bit more. So you can kind of take approaches that way. But after you know who you're talking to, and what their needs are, then you can kind of start drafting some ideas about what the story you're going to tell might be. But I think at that stage, the trap that a lot of companies fall into is they go, we're going to make an explainer video and it needs to talk to 5 different audiences. So we're going to put all that information in there. And then they're like, oh, these features are really important to us and we want to sell more of them. So we're going to put all of those in as well. And it starts becoming this mixed bag of content that starts to stray from like the purpose. So when you're like writing the script, I think it's great. Put all of that stuff in there, and get everybody's thoughts in really early. But then you need a process of going through that where you're like, do all of these things ladder up to the goal we have? Do all the features that we're discussing relate to that specific audience that we listed? Because if there's like, say, 4 or 5 different audiences, the process that those audiences might go through, but the emotional reason for them to go through the process might be very different. So I have this thing about kind of respecting people's time. And with video, we know that you can click off of it very, very quickly. So if you have like even 3 or 4 different audiences you want to hit, if that third audience comes like partway through the video, you've made that person wait through everybody else's emotional pain points and pressures and reasons for being there to maybe get to theirs and then get into the product. You'll never get to them. So it's better just to be very focused with, this is my audience, this is who I'm talking to, I'm going to design content for them. And that shows that you care about them and you care about the time they've spent investing in learning more about your product.
And one of the points here that you mentioned that people make mistakes is when they try to fit 2-3 audiences they want to speak to. So they would say, this will be for the CTO, this will be for the CEO, and this will also be for the engineer. So we'll try to hit several features that they would like because we're demonstrating through this explanation video. And the trap that you're saying is, instead of just picking one for the CTO, picking another one for the engineer, picking another one for the CEO, showing those specific ones for that audience, basically creating it for them, that is the right approach versus putting everything and you just making someone wait until it's their pain point and they might say, it could be for me, but also I don't know about these other ones.
Yeah, I think asking yourself the question of what does this title or what does this person care about is kind of the filter that I would use for that, because the CEO does not care about the same thing as the engineer, right? Like there might be some overlap in the way that say it's a software or a process you have to implement. The process you're implementing, underlying process will be the same. But in order for a process to actually work within an organization, there has to be buy-in, there has to be motivation for actually adoption of that. So the motivation for the engineer might be that the product is easier to use, which means they can get their job done faster, which means they can go home to their kids sooner. Whereas the CEO is going to be thinking about, is this the direction we want to go in with the company? All sorts of different things happening there. So they're also not all going to make the decision at the same time. So it goes back to the timing thing. The engineer is probably going to get told to use the software. The CEO might flag like, hey, I saw this thing, it might be a good solution. They might pass it to someone else to actually make the decision. So the engineer that's being told you have to use this piece of software, they're probably more interested in maybe a high level overview and maybe some post-purchase, this is how you will benefit from this software. Whereas the person making the evaluation decision, they're probably going to look at some stuff early, awareness, what is this all about? What's the feel for it? And then they're going to be deep into mid-funnel content, that decision-making, trust-building phase of like, is this the right tool for us? What does it do? How does it function? All of those kinds of questions will come up at that that phase, and you want to be answering those, while they're evaluating the product. And I guess related to that, again, thinking about what do they need, it's not all about telling them how great your company is. It's also, talking about how can we show them what might work for them.
I feel like that's the most common trap someone keeps. The Lean Startup, I think that was the name of the book, where the guy was like, if I talk with my clients as opposed to the engineers, I would have spent so much money on marketing because we designed and promoted stuff that we thought is good, as opposed to listening to the clients and customers. They told us, this is what we don't want, this is what we want. We kept over-engineering, over-developing things. Now, if you're going through the process, you are wrapping up the script writing, you've picked your persona, you know what their pain points are, you're going to talk to one person. You said the middle of the funnel is where we build trust with videos. And probably someone will come to you and will say, Garus, we have a very complicated sell, and you can't make it simple. You can't make it easy. Like I need to show them like all kinds, or I need to send someone on location, I need to get this extra specific device, go 300 feet below the, whatever it might be. It's becoming like, they feel like they can't build trust in the middle of the funnel without overcomplicating it. What is the right way to build the trust in that middle of the funnel when they're making a decision?
Right. Yeah, I mean, we deal with a lot of complicated products like banking products and engineering products and things like that. And yep, some products are really complicated, but I think you just have to make sure that you are speaking to the buyer at their level. So usually if you're selling a complicated product, the person that's going to be buying that is fairly technical as well. And if you're, aligned on who you're talking to and what they need, that's probably going to be okay. But I think what you want to look at is whether or not the message or the visuals feel like you're bragging about your product or service. You want there to be like a strong proof. It should feel more like evidence than bragging. So you want to show the problem, how it was approached, what changed along the way, and kind of like what became possible as a result of your involvement. And then if you need to get into like the technical things, do that, as long as it is proof in some way that shows your product is different or demonstrates how you're going to make it easier for your client to do something. You don't necessarily want to totally get into the weeds all the time. One way to do that is to maybe make shorter content and a little bit more of it. And that also becomes more useful for the sales team because each prospect they talk to might have a slightly different, need or question at a different point about something that's really technical or complicated. So if you have shorter bite-sized pieces of content, the person you're sharing it with isn't going to be overwhelmed watching through all the stuff that someone else needs to learn. You're just going to send them directly to what they need to learn. So that's one way you could approach that, is break it down. So we did that actually. So Facebook has a application called Professional Dashboard, and they were having some challenges with adoption, but also depth of use because the product was fairly complicated. And that's exactly what we did. We ended up creating about 40 videos for them on different topics that people were getting stuck on. So that was quite helpful. There's also ways to identify whether or not someone is getting stuck somewhere. If you look at you have a longer video on YouTube, and it is a useful video that people are actually watching and you have like decent numbers on it, you can actually look at the watch statistics and see where people have watched over and over again or where people have skipped. And that can be an indicator of something that you could break out into its own standalone piece of content, because obviously people are rewatching it. Either they're finding a lot of value in watching it over and over again, or there's some confusion happening, and you could investigate by creating a standalone piece of content there what's going on.
That's interesting. That is very valuable, because I think most people will see YouTube as just a marketing channel. So they will say, oh, that's the marketing department, as opposed to the engineering department. They can say, this video has been watched XYZ times. These 3 pieces skipped maybe unclear. These ones rewatched, you see that spike, that peaking, like this is where you want to spend some time, and maybe now create some explanation videos. You said almost 50 for a dashboard for Facebook?
Yeah, it's 40 plus. Yeah, it was designed so that it could infinitely expand depending on like what the needs were.
I remember it's getting better now, Meta Business. But in the beginning, I was like, this is the most difficult tool I need to navigate compared to Google Ads. Google Ads was intuitive, top to bottom, move to the next, opens up, go. And then I go to Facebook. I'm like, how do I make ads here? What is these? It was, I needed some videos at that point for sure.
Well, one of the big challenges too is the interfaces of most applications change quite frequently. Even like a very small change can have a ripple effect across the user base. Like, common application that a lot of people use, LinkedIn. If you have a LinkedIn company page and you have a LinkedIn personal account, when you repost with your thoughts, there used to be a switch that was attached to your face when you hit that repost button, and you could switch to your company page and then write your post, and it would go on that part of the site. They changed that one day to be underneath the existing post before you hit repost with your thoughts. There's very little to no documentation on that change happening. And I bet you the search volume on trying to figure out how do I repost as my company is quite high, right? And it seems very minor, but if you think about it on a per user basis, someone could potentially waste half a day trying to figure that out if they don't notice that little button change, right?
Yeah, I think this might be a good hack for people. I use it for how to remove people from your network. A lot of people don't know how because it's buried, or if you want to export your existing network, a lot of people don't know how to do it. So I actually have blogs, and they're one of the most visited ones of how to remove specific people from your network, or how to export because that's part of your data privacy. You can export everyone that you're connected with, CSV file, you can do whatever you want to it, but it's not an easy thing to find, or to see the connections that you have sent. It's not an easy place to find to like, hey, this is who you send a connection with, if they accept it or not. So I think those are also good marketing hacks for someone if they're building some marketing videos around it. They could take advantage of something that you're seeing, like that high search volume of a specific software. Because I remember when I started in Meta, I was like, this is not easy. This is not what I'm used to with the Google paid ads kind of dashboards. But when you're going through the process and you're getting to a place where now is the middle of the funnel and you're creating these videos, you've made them modular. They are working pretty well to help the sales team, to help the company. How do you show that to someone that only sees videos as an expensive spend? We made this one video 5 years ago. We keep, like, if you have a client call, just share them the mission, vision, whatever video, and it's the same repurposing. How do you show these other companies that are out there that video is not just an expense, it is more than that?
Yeah, I mean, if you see it that way, there's no changing that really, because I think it starts at that planning phase and what are you trying to do with the video content. So I look at it as a compounding asset. So especially if your business is in a place where you've got a decent brand, you've been around for a while, and you're going to start telling stories in video, making one piece of content and putting out there, it's really challenging to see value from just that, because it has to be seen by people. So a lot of businesses will start with a very high level explainer or an about the company style video. And the problem with that is that it has a very limited use case and shelf life, because a lot of times the about us video is sort of a snapshot or a moment in time, but it's all about you. It's all about the company. It's not about the customer. So right off the bat, I would say the place to start making content is in the mid-funnel, the decision-making phase. You can look at frequently asked questions you get, for example, from customers, and you can, in the same way you would write a blog post for SEO content by addressing those frequently asked questions or making a FAQ section on the page, you can start addressing that with video. And those are going to be more valuable for longer, because your product, the questions people have about your product don't change that often. But if you can start knocking them off and having various pieces of content to send to someone when they ask that question, that's going to be something you can use over and over and over again for years. And you can learn a lot from it, and your customer gets a lot of value from it, because it's all about them, you know, how you're helping them solve a problem, not only in the question they're asking, but with your product that you've created. So that's a good place to start creating video if you want to actually see some long-term value from it. But as you go year over year, if you're knocking off these types of content within the funnel, you're adding to your asset library of content that you have that, you know, is really foundational for your product. I'd say though, if you're like very, very early stages, you're still trying to figure stuff out, you're not sure who your customer is, you're not sure what your product is, that's going to be a lot more challenging. And at that point, I would say think a little bit smaller. Maybe you just need some brand consistency. Maybe you just need to look at some logo animations or some lower thirds for your videos that you're maybe recording yourself. Just something that creates some brand consistency there. And again, you can think about that as a compounding asset that you can add to over time. But if you're a more established brand, you got a marketing team, you know, but you're just starting to dabble in video, definitely I would start with the mid-funnel content, or even the post-purchase content is a great place to be, like, because you probably know some of the pain points of your customers there, and maybe some of the friction moments. Maybe there's some difficulty with adoption. You can start addressing those issues, and that becomes stuff that every time someone signs up for your product or receives it, you can have this video library that accompanies that and, you know, helps them through the process. And that's definitely about the customer, right? It shows like you cared enough not only to attract them to the business, but now you care about how much value they get from your product after they've purchased it.
Yeah, you've been in that situation. I've been in that situation where you're starting, maybe you bought a new software, or you're starting working with someone and they give you explanation videos and they are very useful and helpful, versus trying to figure out in your, I mean, you can figure it out. Like, it's not that difficult. You're making dashboards fairly intuitive. It's just that you don't know, forgot which company it was. The unsubscribe was buried in, like, not even billing, or like somewhere else, deliberately like buried somewhere. Stuff like that is what you want to know, because if you want to change billing, cancel, or whatever, you want to navigate easily before you explode on, you know, leaving negative reviews. Now, it was very good to explain to someone where they should start, because I think that's what a lot of people have on their mind. Where do I start? What are the first things? If I engage with Garus and the booth, where do I start? And having that clear idea that if you start with the FAQ section versus the About Us, it will last long, because About Us is more about you. It changes, versus these, and you're right, they don't dramatically change. Like, what people need from video and motion graphic design, tweaks here or there, but you still need it. The questions will still be the same. When do I start it? What is the first thing? I have a SaaS. Do I make explanation videos? How do you make a good, like, all those questions are still relevant. If you make videos around those, it will be very impactful. And if you're small and starting, brand consistency, animation of logos, start and finish stuff, kind of keeping that consistent. Now, talking about the small guys, or maybe some of the big ones that are trying new stuff, let's touch a little bit on AI, because it is picking up a lot of steam, specifically in the video side. Because I think when it came out, it looked horrible. It was like Will Smith eating spaghetti. Okay, we get that one. But then it was, people tried, like some of the agencies, Calci, I believe, and Coca-Cola, they tried, and it was a huge, people were not happy, basically. They were saying they're soulless, but time has passed by and they look much better. They look very different now. Those AI video tweaks sometimes that are applied, not like the whole generation of the whole video, but they start to look fairly close. And companies like Hicksfield, they would promote, hey, you know, take an image and I'll make it into a video, and so on and so forth. Where do you see correct implementation of AI? Where do you see the bad way of implementing AI in video specifically?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right about the evolution, and like all technology, it's going to continue to progress. It's an interesting conversation to have because in the world that I'm from, it's like there's artists and designers, and there are also business owners and producers, and all these people have different kind of perspectives on the value of it or lack of value. So it's a bit challenging to discuss, but what I mean, so I can formulate a thought here for you. So on the IP side, that conversation's quite tough because it's AI borrows and some say steals from various sources, whether it was approved or not, and there's like lots of stuff going on about that. So that can be challenging, I think, for some brands because you might get themselves into some hot water with that. But it's also an interesting topic because if you're an artist, you yourself are also borrowing from people. And when I look back at like the history of, say like a director's treatment for a commercial, they're probably going out on the internet on those early days and looking for reference material to put in the mood board. Like an easy way to reference is you're designing a new room in your house and you go on Pinterest and you grab a whole bunch of different images, you put them together, and that's your mood board. So directors do that when they're making a film. They're not selling it as their own work, but they're selling it as like the vibe and the direction. And then they've used their creative eye, their artist's eye, to make a selection and say, this is the direction we should go in. And then after that, they're going to continue to do that over and over and over again, referencing things, talking to other people who have referenced things, gathering all that together and making a decision. So it's a bit tricky to discuss that without being kind of hypocritical in a way. Now, I do realize that AI does it at a massive scale, so it feels quite different. So on the individual human level, you get very agitated about the idea that someone has stolen your work or whatever. And I get that. I wouldn't want my work to be stolen either. So that's kind of a challenging side thing that's just happening within like the creative industry. I shouldn't call it a side thing. It's a big thing that's happening with the creative industry. But then there's the kind of business case where you're like, well, if there's some things that we can do more efficiently, maybe we should look at doing that. And at the end of the day, like I think there are some things that artists do that are repetitive tasks that they may not want to do. But it's challenging too, because there's an argument for if you don't toil through the creative process, you haven't really discovered or created anything new as a result, because that process is what actually builds the new thing. But if you relate it back to your example of Coca-Cola, I mean, I looked at that stuff and I was like, okay, yeah, Coca-Cola made another ad. They used AI this time. People are mad about it. But I think it's because of this sort of the theme of our conversation here about trust. It's like we all have this feeling, whether we know it or not, towards Coca-Cola. The bears and the Christmas time and all these things that they do, summer fun, all that kind of stuff, refreshing, and they make it out of AI, and then you're like, I've been lied to now, and I can see that I've been lied to, and it kind of like hurts a little bit, even though it's a brand. So I think there's also that kind of reaction to it. Now, and then the other thing to consider is with this trust piece is when you watch a commercial on television, as just an outsider from a company you don't know, and it's like an awareness commercial, you don't know those actors in that commercial. And if it's like all characters and animation, you don't know who drew those things. So you kind of look at it, you're like, okay, great. it's a story. I either like it or I don't, but I don't know those people. The individual actors are going to be upset about not having that job and it going to AI. But as a person in the world, at a point where you can't tell if it is or is not a real human, I don't think you care at that stage as much. And that's unfortunate, but I think it's the truth. Like no one knows an unknown actor, right? They're just on screen and they do a commercial and you're like, okay, great. But we've been also talking a lot about the mid-funnel content. And I think that that's where it's like a little closer to home, where like oftentimes at that point you have the founder of the company, or you have someone who you've talked to like in a sales call, and you're kind of like you're trusting those people actually exist and are real. So I think if you're to use AI at that stage with live action, it might hurt the brand, because that's a trust building phase. And I think inherently generated video content doesn't carry the same trust weight that an actual conversation like this would. And then if you go on the creative side of it, because we're talking about like script development and the goals for the video and like how the video is crafted. The Will Smith example is great because it's like a clip of a famous person doing something and it just looks silly, right? And we've progressed, like you said, quite a bit to now Will Smith can eat his spaghetti and he has all his fingers, or not more fingers than he should have. And it looks exactly true. But that isn't really making video content that inspires people to move to action. That's just a clip. So to go from like a clip to making an actual like commercial that tells a story or explains your product, that's a totally different process. And it's not one that you can just generate. So, because I don't know if you ever noticed when you're using like Claude or ChatGPT, if you ask it a question, it'll give you an answer. If you ask another question, it'll give you an answer. If you disagree with it, it'll agree with you. And it can just go on forever, right? So how do you know what answer it's giving is good or not? Especially if it's not a black and white like question, right? If it's creative, creative is like the most important, unimportant thing in the process. It's like a creative person knows when to stop, right? They know when the thing is good and when the story does, has all the pieces that ladder up to what the goal is going to be. With AI, if you're trying to generate a script, you might think it's good and it might be good, but how do you know if it is? So what I've noticed with some of the AI platforms now that are creating ads for themselves, they are very well written ads. The scene selection is very good and they know how to tell a story. And I would imagine, ChatGPT hired Jonathan Ive's new design business, I can't remember the name of it, to run their creative department. Jonathan Ive's used to design for Apple, right? They didn't just use their own software to generate ads for themselves. They hired the best designer they could hire to create this stuff for them. So yes, visually it's progressed quite a bit, but I think, to kind of wrap up my answer, I think that it would be a mistake to believe that the result of some video clips strung together in a series actually is achieving the goal that you want it to. Yes, it will probably cost less. It maybe will take less time, but I'm not totally convinced on that, because we've done some testing and burned a month of credits in 4 hours and not had a result that was usable in a end production. So that's got a little bit of ways to go. But if you want to try it, great. But I think there's still a craft there and an artistry to creating stories that people respond to and that resonate with them in a way that they can trust and move forward with, and feel as though it solved the problem or helped them achieve the thing they want to achieve.
I see exactly what you mean by that, because the main point is execution, maybe, but it's missing a lot of stuff. So can it make a logo? Yeah. Can it make a video with a scene behind you and da-da-da? Yeah, but it will miss something. That's why OpenAI hired the best guy that it can get to tell a story. They didn't invent a new machine that can tell a better story. There's something still missing there. It's not just about the execution. Now,
yeah, if the product that they're producing was the solution, they would have used it.
That's right.
Okay.
If people listen to this and they're like, I really like what he does and the approach he does with motion graphic design and videos, how do people get a hold of you to work with you?
LinkedIn's great. Or yeah, it's just my name, Garus Booth. Or my email's on the website. And yeah, that's probably the best way, buythebooth.com.
Garris, thank you so much for the time, and I wish you all the success.